Is there any order that you won't carry out? How far are you willing to go? Our constitutional liberties are being infringed. You swore an oath. Are you with us or with them? This is intended primarily for the sheriff of Tree County, Kentucky. However, feel free to share with your local sheriff, as this is a grave issue. First, I would like to say thank you for what you do and for your service to this community. I do not envy your position at this point in time. Unlike you, I was not elected by the people of this community, although I feel that I can speak for all in saying that we want to continue to live as free, sovereign citizens and to be able to leave such a legacy to our progeny. What is at stake today is monumental and will set a precedent for future generations. Historically speaking, once rights are forfeited or taken away, they aren't freely returned. Due to our current situation, whether by consent, by fear, or by standing idly by, we have relinquished liberty for security. How we feel in regards to the virulence of this virus is not important. The rights that we have surrendered, whether temporary or for good, are non-negotiable because they have been endowed upon us by our Creator, and it is precisely this way because if they are bestowed to us by the government, what the government gives, the government can and will take away. If rights come from an authority higher than the government has no right to take them away. Conversely, if the government is the highest authority, they will act as God. A government can only control. That's its primary function. And control and liberty are a zero-sum dialectic. The more you're controlled, the less liberty you have, and vice versa. This is why there have been checks and balances installed in our governing structure from its very inception. At every level, there exist balances of power, but in times past, each level has become more self-serving. The last line of defense is a sheriff in each county that can override the federal and state authorities, and should if need be. Right now, the need is alive and well. The state, the federal, and even arbitrary international governments are stripping us of our liberties. This is the definition of tyranny. Do you remember the day you were sworn in? Have you made an oath on multiple occasions? Did you place your hand on the Bible with God as your witness? Do you stand prepared to meet your Maker and answer for what you do in the line of duty? I'm sure the answer is always and unequivocally yes. Each and every sheriff is a constitutional officer that swears an oath that goes something like this. I, Nelson B. Shelton, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Granted, we have a preceding precedent set with the example of the Spanish flu. Churches, schools, and many other institutions and businesses closed across our land, but for only 2.5 to 3 weeks in duration for the most part. This was a pandemic that lasted a year and swiftly claimed the lives of roughly 50 million worldwide. When the number of new cases slowed down, life opened back up again. Today, we have been locked down for 6 going on 7 weeks officially. The worldwide death toll is nearing 300,000. Most of us are aware of the CDC's directions to inflate the numbers by adding COVID to the death certificate if it was suspected, whether it be the cause of death or not. This led, naturally, to memes of headlines that read, "Man shot in head, dies of COVID-19. All jokes and allegations aside, there is a real virus. However, nothing is worth liberty and acquiescing to the forfeiting of God-given inalienable rights. To famously quote Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." This is what we have staring us in our faces. Our children will inherit neither because the battle of our lifetime was fought from a smartphone while sitting on the couch. Now, assuming that everyone was able to buy another round of phone, internet, and/or cable, we have all been witness to the transgression of several essential liberties. Small businesses tanked, churches closed, pastors jailed, parishioners fined and denied the ability to practice religious freedom. In one episode, we watched Greenville, Mississippi law enforcement tell Pastor Charles Hamilton Jr. his constitutional rights were suspended as he attempted to have a drive-in service.
Order from a Yeah.
No right.
No.
New York City banned protests, and there has been language of permanently closing churches. There goes the First Amendment. There have been talks of mandatory inoculations by health officials.
And it won't be normal until we get an amazing vaccine to the entire world. The vaccine is critical because until you have that, things aren't really going to be normal. They can open up to some degree, but the risk of a rebound will be there until we have very broad vaccination. And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine.
Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications.
If you want to get to pre-corona virus, that might not ever happen in the sense of the fact that the threat is there. But I believe with the therapies that will be coming online and with the fact that I feel confident that over a period of time we will get a good vaccine, that we will never have to get back to where we are right back now. So if that means getting back to normal, then we'll get back to normal.
Let me put it very clearly. You have no constitutional right to endanger the public and spread a disease, even if you disagree. You have no right not to be vaccinated. You have no right not to wear a mask. You have no right to open up your business.
Wait, can I stop you? No right not to be vaccinated, meaning if they decide you have to be vaccinated, we have to be vaccinated?
Absolutely. And if you refuse to be vaccinated, the state has the power to literally take you to a doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm.
So I have the solution. Every study published in the last 5 years, when you look at vaccine refusers, I'm not talking about, hesitants, most of them we can talk into coming to terms, but refusers. We'll just get rid of all the whites in the United States.
Apple and Google teamed up to develop an app for governments in order to spy on its citizens. Together, the two companies comprise of 99.99% of all cell phone users. If you don't think they can, how do you think Google Maps knows when there's a traffic jam? The NSA believes me, they know it can be done. The truth is, this technology has been available for quite some time. Currently, there is a massive ongoing effort to contact trace every person who has been known to have tested positive for the invisible enemy we face. Those who they then come in contact with are contacted and spied on to make sure that they comply with the quarantine measurements. But what if they don't? What if a parent has tested positive and the children haven't? There is talk of removing children and rehousing people in families where one is tested positive and there is only one household bathroom.
What is contact tracing? The basic idea is simple. Track down infected people, then find everyone who has been near them and encourage those people to stay home until it's clear they are not sick. Large portions of the world's population are currently on lockdown, but it's when restrictions are lifted that contact tracing is likely to become even more important.
We need tracing agents in the hundreds and hundreds of people, right? You take the test and then you trace back all the contacts. It's never been done on this scale before. This is an army of tracers, they're basically investigators.
One of the things that you have to be able to do is to track people who are positive. Where were they? Who were they in contact with?
You're absolutely right. The predicate for getting back to some semblance of normalcy is our ability to identify individuals through testing, to be able to trace their contacts, to isolate individuals that have either been exposed or quarantine people that are tested positive. And that's just going to require an army of folks and the capacity of consideration from individuals to allow for their privacy to be impacted.
And again, we'll isolate every one of them, and we will find every one of their contacts, and we will make sure that they stay quarantined, and we'll check in with them every day. Some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom, and there are 3 or 4 other people living there, and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available.
Authorities may have to enter people's homes and remove family members, presumably by force.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
This is a global effort, not just nationwide, as H.R. 6666 suggests. It's not just statewide either, as our very own governor of Kentucky has suggested as a condition for reopening Kentucky's livelihood. This violates our Fourth Amendment rights, and there is no consent or warrant involved. And while the program operates through volunteers, or citizens telling on neighbors and foes, reporting them to the app anonymously, this can all be stopped at the county level by you, the sheriff, a constitutional officer, doing your duty by refusing to enforce unconstitutional mandates in the community you serve. And we hope you will, because law enforcement stands between civilization and chaos. That, the bravery, and the willing sacrifice are the most admirable part of working in law enforcement. In recent years, local law enforcement has slowly turned into a revenue-generating force for the government. Nobody signs up to do that. The tax collector has no honor. Honor lies with the brave and the true. And just like any other job, I imagine, you have to take the good with the bad. But please, don't let them take our liberties away. We, the people, need you on our side now more than ever. We need men and women of valor to take a stand for their community and say no to tyranny and stand in the way of injustice like you do every other day. People tend to have a normalcy bias, especially here in the USA. People don't think that the atrocities of times past can occur here, but they can. And not only can they happen, I believe we are on the brink of tyranny. As a student of history, I can say with great clarity that not only can this happen here, but all of the chess pieces are in line for tyranny to reveal its ugly face here on our soil. And with tyranny comes atrocity. Historically speaking, police forces have played an integral and inextricable role in past regimes of horror. There was the Cheka of Lenin's Soviet Russia, who were used to weed out the undesirables like Cossacks, Orthodox Christians, and Russians who believed in Russia, or what we call fundamentalists. After a bloody civil war, Lenin's police henchmen purged anywhere from 30,000 Russians a year to 250,000 in total, depending on which historian you ask. You have the Armenian Christian genocide of the Ottoman Empire. It was ordered by the government and carried out by their equivalent of police, with 1.5 million dead. The Gestapo, a police force under Himmler in the Third Reich who targeted churches and other political dissidents that were deemed enemies of the state and were sent to camps to work until they starved, were executed, or died of disease. You had the NKVD of Joseph Stalin's Russia, which was the precursor to the KGB. This is the same NKVD that Yale professor Timothy D. Snyder concluded was responsible for 9 million deaths, with 6 million of those being deliberate killings. This figure does not include, however, the 4 to 10 million who died in the genocide known as the Holodomor, where Ukrainian kulaks were the victims of an ethnic cleansing and intentionally starved or sent to die in the frigid Siberian gulags, all for being a self-sustaining group of farming communities. You had the party members of Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward in China. They looked the other way as roughly 80 million people were starved or participated by clubbing dissidents to death or executing people for failing to toe the party line of the almighty state. And while it is not widely discussed, the Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot in Cambodia ravaged homes. They left scorched earth in their path. They wasted the lives of those the state's iconoclasts deemed to be parasites. They pulled villagers from their homes and they dragged them into the killing fields. 1/3 of their population was decimated. When the architect of the killing fields, Nguyen Che, was interviewed as late as the early 2000s, he still felt that he did no wrong in carrying out the orders of the state. We tend to suppress the fact that the perpetrators of these former atrocities were people and not just monsters. They were people like you and I who believed what the state demanded was for a good cause. The scores of millions of people slaughtered in the last 100 years were all considered enemies of the state. The people carrying out the orders from the state were simply doing their job. Today, those who wish to have freedom and carry on with life are taking on the same persona of political dissidents and enemies of society in the public sphere of media and the realm of politics. And who do you think will be asked to carry out the orders of the states when we refuse to comply with unconstitutional demands? It will be you. Our law enforcement agencies have been primed for this moment. The motto for law enforcement across the land used to be to protect and serve, until the Supreme Court decided that this was no longer necessary. Although the motto could be left intact, but only to protect and serve the interests of the oligarchs and plutocrats, the black gentry cabal that George Washington spoke of. And our modern police forces are more technologically advanced and more militarized than any other police force in history, and most contemporary nations' militaries. Many historians point to the East German Stasi as the most effective and elaborate police force in history. But who are we kidding? The German Stasi couldn't hold a candle to our American SWAT teams with tactical gear, advanced communications, technology, and databases with our crowd-dispersing technology. Although the East German Stasi forces are more directly comparable to the contact tracing program. Yet if we openly admit this, we will have poked a hole in the wet paper facade that is known as the land of the free, where there are more laws on the books than any other nation or state ever, with more people in prison per capita than anywhere else in the world. When we can't say this is the land of the free anymore, we need to be the land of the brave. It doesn't have to continue in this trajectory. Take the recent and all but forgotten display of solidarity against the attempted suppression of Virginians' Second Amendment rights by a decree from the state's governor, who even threatened to activate the National Guard to confiscate weapons. The people protested, but what turned the tide was the overwhelming majority of sheriffs in the state of Virginia that stood firmly against this order. Because of this, the governor's agenda was decisively defeated. Or take the most recent example of former Army Ranger and Seattle police officer Greg Anderson, who posted a video pleading with fellow law enforcement officers to respect people's constitutional rights and to just do the right thing. Now he is on leave and it may have cost him his job, but Officer Anderson swore an oath and he lives with honor and a clear conscience. When faced with a decision, he stuck to his convictions and said no job is worth it. He now has the respect and support from the people he vowed to serve. You were selected to fulfill this role at this time and place for a reason. You were selected not just by the people within the realm of your jurisdiction who trust you, but by a higher power and by fate. You are being tested. The contents of your character is being examined, and your subsequent actions will be the determining factor of the results of this test. What side of history will you be on? Will you stand with us? If so, please address this issue publicly. Make a stance and declare null and void any unconstitutional mandates of any sort. God bless. Sincerely, we the people.